You're welcome back. It's time to talk to the youth now. We had the minister refer a whole lot to the youth and those programs meant for them. So let's get their own perception and reaction to some of those. So even though we cannot get all the youth in Nigeria to talk, I believe that we have not representative right here. We have the special advisor on job creation and MSMEs to the president. He is a youth also and likes to speak for the youth and interact a whole lot with them. Joining us from our Abuja studio is Temitola Adekunle Johnson. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and another youth joining us virtually is from Yaga Africa. Ibrahim Farouk is Africa Program Coordinator, joins us virtually. Ibrahim, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let me start with you, Ibrahim. I wonder if you heard a bit of what the minister was saying. Beautiful ideas and action, he told us, going on around the country. For you as a youth, how much impact would you say this administration has had on the youth, on their jobs, their careers, their education?
Thank you. I know you keep on calling me a youth. Maybe you should call me a young person, because
young person,
if you look at Nigeria's youth policy, I think I'll be past the age of 29.
Okay.
But that is fine. I was able to catch some of the remarks by the Honorable Minister of Education, and especially when he spoke about the Nigerian Education Loan Fund, NEL Fund. And I think when we look back at the year 2025 and some of the programs of the current administration that have affected young people, and especially a mass of young people that we have in tertiary institutions around the country, NEL Fund is one of those programs that has impacted young people. And we saw from his presentation that over 800,000 young people have applied, and over 500,000 are beneficiaries. But from your report, we can see that there are some other programs, especially domiciled in the Ministry of Youth Development, that need as much push, as much awareness around them. When you talk about the Nigerian Youth Investment Fund, for instance, and there have been allocations of billions of naira for young people with business ideas to invest, as well as the Nigerian Youth Academy. And we could also see in your report where the Minister for Youth Development was also signing some memorandum of understanding in the UAE with another minister, with his counterpart minister, but very little information is out there about some of these initiatives that young people can enjoy, apart from the NEL Fund, which I think has become a flagship program for this administration, especially when it comes to talking about young people. I think President Tinubu also mentioned it in his address to the nation on October 1st, where he was referencing some of the initiatives that young people have been able to enjoy so far, and he mentioned NEL Fund very clearly, but was silent about some of these other programs and policies which really have not taken off from the ground. I know we also have the 3MTT, the 3 Million Technical Talents program as well, even though that is not domiciled under the Ministry of Youth Development. We know that it is largely targeted at young people, providing them with technical skills so that they can also be empowered.
All right, thank you so much. But let me come to Temitola. I know you are in government, so most likely we're going to get a lot of positives from you. But I know in my former interactions with you, you are also very conscious of the youth and passionate about entrepreneurs. How impactful would you say your office or this administration has been to youths who are interested in doing business when you look at the business environment in the country?
Thank you. Thank you once again. At the inception of this government, we launched a few schemes. There were some schemes that were launched under the past administration, President Buhari's administration. A few of them were modified by President Bola Tinubu. One of those schemes is the National MSME Clinics, which is now the expanded MSME Clinics. The modification came in the sense that he wanted it to be all-encompassing. For instance, he wanted an aspect where there was a grant aspect to these loans, to the scheme. So when you go into a state, you assemble 5,000, sometimes 7,000 MSMEs in the states for exhibition and discussions on how to move their businesses forward. We wanted an aspect where the outstanding ones would get some grants from federal government. So we introduced this 250,000 naira grants for outstanding businesses. So that would be like is a 100% grant. We would not need to pay anybody, repay that fund. Now, what we have realized and noticed is that majority of the outstanding beneficiaries are youths, and when I say youths, mostly ladies as well. So not just the fact that they are youths, and they are female that win that qualify to win this outstanding what you might call it now grants during the clinics. And as a result of the clinics, we also have built 21 MSME shared facilities. Now, these facilities became necessary as a result of the fact that once we go into different clinics and we engaged MSMEs, a lot of them raised the issue of access to international world-class equipment, that they could not afford those equipment and they needed support from government. So what we did was the federal government will liaise with the states to understand what sort of clusters they wanted support with. And the federal government will, in partnership with our private sector partners and some government agencies, bring in this equipment, sometimes to the tune of maybe like 200 to 300 different equipments in a state, in a facility where SMEs will be able to use that facility from 9 o'clock every day till about 5 o'clock in most states. Usually Monday to Friday in most states. Some states have started operating on Saturdays as well. But these are intended to support the youthful population in business as well. And you'll notice that out of the 21 facilities so far, 21 to 23 facilities so far, about 70–80% of them are youth-centric. They are youth-centric in the sense that you have ICT, you have fashion, which is 80% female. You have ICT, you have fashion, you have, now we have introduced Mechanic City. In 2026, the plan within the first quarter, the plan is to go full blast with makeup artists and those cosmetics and those that tie daily and all those works, you know, because statistics and data has shown that there's a lot of money being made from just being able to use your hands positively. I've said this over and over again. There was a time I sat down. In short, this December, my wife was going for a party. She and a few friends and cousins were just around they were just setting up, and somebody painted their faces, and the woman collected 75,000 naira from each of them. That lady did not spend 2 hours. And she told them that she had extra 30 minutes for them because she was moving to the next location. That was on a Saturday. So I engaged this young lady to say, how fruitful, how productive is this thing? How profitable is it? And she told me that she's a banker. Banking is a regular job, but weekends, this is what... And she told me in confidence that on a very good month, she makes at least 10 million naira just doing that. So as a government, we are trying to speak to stakeholders in that space as well to see how we can shape in and support that space.
Okay, I think it's about time I also...
Amongst other spaces.
If you can hear me, Mr. Adekunle Johnson, I think it's about time I also try to go back to my fine arts, you know, in
You think making up is just about fine arts?
I mean, you really can't tell. Well, you know, staying with you for a bit before I go back to our other guy talking about governance. I'll ask you a question that we took time to ask the Honorable Minister. Collaboration. I've always held the view that the states have indigenes. We can say we are citizens of Nigeria, but we are indigenes of various states. Now, the federal government can come up with all of the initiatives and everything, but whatever the initiatives are from the federal government, it is in the states where the rubber meets the road. So what's it like at that level? And if you can give us an example of a particular sector where there is an interface between the federal government, your office in the presidency, and the state governments, about how we drill down MSMEs, job creation and all, to the young and all sorts of other people needing such services in the various states.
Ayo, thank you very much for that question. I get asked that question a lot, and I must say maybe we are lucky within this space because we've had very positive collaborations with the state governments. The MSME clinics I've been speaking about is an initiative of the federal government. But when we go into the states, it is the states that execute it. We just give them the templates and we guide them. They execute it pre the event. During the event, we collaborate together, and after the event, there's a follow-up. Mechanism, which I'm a part of as well. And all the facilities, there's no facility that we have put in a place, no shared facility that we have put in a place that was not in consultation with the state government. You know, what we were able to do, or what we have been able to do within these spaces, we have written to the state government, gone to them, and showed them the sort of value they will get from getting these things done. And it's a no-brainer that if you're a governor and you support the MSME ecosystem, I mean, you'll be seen to be doing well for yourself. So most of the schemes that we have done, we've got, at least if we have, now the MSME clinics, we have done 10 states. Facilities, the president has asked the VP to commission close to about 11 now. As we speak, we have about 10 on commission. By January, we are going to start commissioning facilities with the state government. Another area where they have cooperated with us was the issue of de-risking. Access to funding is a major issue for SMEs. It's been a major issue for many years. Now, what we've done, like you said, everybody will say we're a citizen of Nigeria, but people they are indigenes. So the MSMEs are domiciled in states. So when people just look at the federal government, what are they doing in this place? What are they doing in that place? Don't forget that they are the subnationals. Okay. So
well, before I take, I'd like to ask Mr. Farouk about communication, but before I go to him, how we communicate these initiatives. But before I go to him, let me cite one example, one instance that I'd like you to speak to quite sufficiently, and that is agriculture, for instance. One of the thoughts in the hearts and minds of many was that, okay, the federal government said they're going to set up some, say, 500,000 hectares of land for farming and all of those things. The concern was that of off-taking. Small farmers or smallholder farmers, as they call them, I don't know what capacity, they have to scale up and all of that. So is there, what's the arrangement, for instance, with state governments in that regard? How many people are being targeted? Let's speak to agriculture alone, in the entire agricultural value chain. How many people are being targeted? What are the successes we have been able to achieve in this year? And then we can talk about promises.
Okay, so with regards to this, I'm going to speak skeletally on what I know. And I assure you that the Minister of Agriculture will speak in depth into it. I'm aware that there are discussions ongoing on, okay, so the thing is that when it comes to giving up land, mass hectare of land for some of these schemes, it takes time between the collaboration or cooperation takes time from between the federal government and the state government. But I'm aware that these discussions they are ongoing. They are even past stages of discussions, and I think they are within the implementation frame now. And I want to believe that by January, the entire country will start hearing some good things within that space. I know, for instance, that the Niger State governor is about to kickstart his own partnership with the federal state and with the federal government. I know the Jigawa State governor as well. They've gone very far into their own discussions, and I'm aware that Governor Zulum has also gone very far with ease as well. But like I said, I will just speak skeletally into this. And you know, when you asked me, you were saying that to give you just one state of how well our collaborations have gone. If you don't mind, I can give you 5. If you wanted me to give you, I could give you 21, but because of time, I can give you just 5 very quickly. We have collaborated successfully end-to-end in terms of the entire value chain. For MSME, for de-risking fund, for facilities with states like Katsina. Don't forget that the governor of Katsina was the former DG, Director General of SMEDAN. So this MSME business, he understands it very, very quickly. And that's why he has replicated most of the things we do in the federal, in his states. We have collaborated successfully with the governor of Imo State, Governor Hope Uzodinma. We have collaborated successfully with the governor of Enugu State, with the governors of Borno, with the governor of Ekiti State, the governor of Lagos State. Basically, we have Cross River. We have collaborated. We see, as we speak, I can say we have collaborated with at least 21 states.
All right, Mr.
And
Johnson,
the others,
if I may come in.
we have
yes.
Positive response from them.
Yes.
On the fact that they also would like to collaborate as well. So is it that we are lucky or we're doing something that the states like within this SME space?
Yeah, I'm going to come back to you, and I'll stay with business and the SMEs, which is your own expertise, and probe further, because sometimes this thing look great on paper. Implementation is a different kettle of fish when you probe even further. But let me take it to Ibrahim, whose focus is mainly about governance, election management, and such things. Ibrahim, let's talk about an outlook, because the whole idea is to review the year and look at next year. That's the whole idea of this program. So, looking back at 2025, you and I were in the mother city in Cape Town, and one of the things we saw was the aggregation of the Global South in terms of social movement trying to hold on to their own to make sure that, look, democracy is preserved as much as possible. All of these things we are talking about, it has to run through an ideology within the political system, else it's going to fail or it's going to be counterproductive. For us now, we run the ideology of democracy. So if you look at 2025 as a person, from your organization point of view, how did, say, the young people, in terms of inclusion, how did they fare? And what are you looking at now? There's an election coming up in 2027. We're almost saying 2026 because the politicians have started from the last election already. How do you think they are going to fare in terms of inclusion and participation? Because it beats my imagination sometimes that Africa is a population of young persons, including Nigeria, but with a greater sense of respect. We're obsessed with old leadership.
Thank you so much, Geoffrey. I think maybe just to start these remarks, especially around youth participation in governance in the year under review, is to cast our minds back to the speech the president made on October 1st, 2024, where he announced that there would be a national youth conference, basically a replication of the 2014 national conference, but this was going to be a youth conference, not a national conference, to bring young people from across the country representing diverse interests.
You know, it's just, those are just the issues. So let me ask Mr. Farouk, before we hopefully get the minister back. Sometimes the challenge is people don't even trust that we are, or have the assurance or confidence, just as Jeffrey has expressed, that some of these initiatives will even see the light of day. So I was trying to, I wanted to ask you the other time about communication, how government communicates with the people, not just inform, but communicates with the people to get their feedback and get their buy-in on any initiative that they're going to come up with so that the people can co-own. How well would you say that as a nation, be it federal or state governments, we have been able to perform in that regard?
Thank you so much, Ayo. And I remember you started to ask the question around communication. And I think beyond communication, it's more about engagement and consultation. I know when the other guest who is in the studio in Abuja was speaking about some of the work that they've done at the subnational level. He mentioned that consultations have taken place with state governments. And I was hoping to hear that consultations had also taken place with stakeholders, citizen stakeholders at the subnational level. And unfortunately, that was something that was missing. I think that there is a gap that both the federal government and the subnational governments have when it comes to communicating with citizens and also receiving feedback on what exactly are some of the interests, what are some of the needs, what are some of the requirements that citizens and stakeholders have across different spaces. I know that in our political spaces, for instance, when we talk about governance or inclusion, we can host a town hall meeting that brings together members of one political party, and there's very little space left for opposition voices or for voices of dissent, which essentially is an ingredient of any democracy and helps to sharpen whatever conversation or discussions that are taking place. Communication must be two ways. That means there's communication from the government to citizens and stakeholders, and also from citizens and stakeholders to government as well, and not just communication, which is one way. And then beyond communication, it is important that when we're speaking about these issues, whether it is with MSMEs, or whether it is around policies such as the one product per local government, like the Honorable Minister was talking about, is that there needs to be two-way communication, there needs to be engagement with stakeholders and citizens, and there needs to be consultation as well.
All right. Thank you, Farouk. Let's get back to the Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, we understand you're back. There was a day for whatever reason, Ayo did not come to work, but I was representing Ayo on that show, and I wore traditional for the first time on live TV. And the people in the textile industry sent me a message that you look nice. It's just that we can tell you that good percentage of what you're wearing is imported, and it was heartbreaking, which is why I take this question of textile industry super personal, because this is a gold mine for us in Nigeria alone, not to talk about export. Honorable Minister, you can continue.
Yes, please. I mean, I get your point. A country of about 230 million people. You can imagine if we all had to, depend on, we're self-sufficient in terms of our textile industry. You can imagine how huge. And I think that our past history more than, supports that fact, which is why this government is also focusing on having to revitalize the textile industry. I started by saying that I've done a multi-city tour of Kaduna and Lagos, textile establishments, UNTL and all of that, to see firsthand what it is. In Kaduna, I also went to Chelco, which is still up and running. And I think that, working presently, the government, they had talked about having to establish a CTG board, Cotton Textile and Garment, board. We're working on establishing, development council. Also, brought together all the different stakeholders, cotton, textile, and garment into one room, in the conversation. And, again, I draw from our industrial clusters and parks, we've come up with a position that the best way to see how we can revitalize this moribund, sector is, again, to establish industrial parks around these locations where we have these moribund industries, and I think that a lot of work is going on. Arise RIP, presently working with the Ogun State government, offers us quite some kind of, indication about what can happen. And, the Afri-Exim Bank had submitted a memo to Mr. President on this same subject. And I think that, so a lot of, multiple, directions and interests are involved in trying to make sure that we get back the lost glory of this subsector. And I think that if you even find out in terms of the dressed fashion of Nigerians at the moment, I think that it more than supports the fact that we're getting more and more traditional. And I think that, we try to see how, in fact, our present initiative also has to do with the fact that not so much cotton alone, there are some other byproducts, the petrochemical industry that are also part of, in terms of fiber. So we're also coming up with quite a lot of, innovations, a lot of new renewed thinking that can support the growth of this sector and get us back to where we were before and even be able to more than overcome it.
For the sake of sustainability, Senator, what happened to the textile industry? And how do we ensure we don't go back there again? You talked about it being moribund. It's beyond moribund. A lot of jobs have been lost. A lot of destinies have been lost to it. So what happened historically to the textile industry, and how do we ensure, as you bring it back, we don't go back to that era?
Well, I think we lost it to, the kind of unfair competition that, our textile industry was exposed to from China and from some other clients. We couldn't compete. We lost it, because of a lot of the people who smuggling, and activities and all of that. And I think that the way to go to, that we don't go back to this has to do with, various policy initiatives that we put in place, how, for example, even in terms of, the cost of production, the fact, for example, that, China and other, people, Chinese, they came into the country and, because of the incentives and other things that their own industries and all that are exposed to in their countries, they're able to bring in, cheaper, fabric and textile materials that, our own couldn't compete. So all of that, the cost of doing business, all of these things are the things, for example, that we expect that the Nigerian industrial policy at the general level is going to be able to address. And then, sector by sector, various policies, initiatives are also going to be able to address and to respond. There are incentives that government in itself also has to be prepared to be able to provide in order to make us competitive enough. Don't forget, we're also in an era where we're talking about the AFCFTA, and all of that, just so that Nigeria doesn't become a dumping ground. Nigeria has to compete and compete, effectively. So the issue of competitiveness, infrastructure development and competitiveness, one of the strategic pillars of our new, Nigerian industrial policy, remain key and remain very important in terms of how not to go back, to those challenges and those mistakes that got us to where we are. So the various strategic pillars of Nigerian industrial policy will help us a great deal, at the global level. That, sector by sector, the various, policy instruments that we're going to put in place will be able to protect our local industries. Mr. President, some months back, made a pronouncement, a very profound one, on the Nigerian First policy. And I think that practicalizing this and implementing and getting it to happen are some of the things, for example, that the new initiatives and interests in terms of revitalizing moribund industries will make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past.
All right, Senator. Well, I'm glad you talked about the Nigeria First policy that was revived this year, and also the industrial policy, which was validated in September, which is supposed to build around domestic value addition, which led to the 30% value addition for raw materials. We know, or we heard of some controversies around that. That's the 30% addition to raw materials before it can be exported. Where are the cottages that will help these raw materials, the process of adding value to these raw materials? How do you measure 30%? And there are some individuals or players in the industry, in the real sector, who complain about this 30% at compulsory addition of value, that it's actually deterring them from their businesses.
Okay, now let me put this in proper context. Like you said, it's the Nigerian industrial policy was not just validated some months back. That policy has been approved by the Federal Executive Council. So we have a Nigerian industrial policy. Now, having said so, you talked about the 30%, value addition. Again, that bill, is still before the National Assembly. I think it's been passed by one of the chambers the other chamber is yet to pass it. But having said so, I think that we need to get serious as a country. We need to be able to be very, deliberate and determined and intentional about whether we actually want to achieve the industrial growth that this country deserves or not. And we need to, focus on jobs, on productivity, on export, on MSMEs and all of that. So if that is our focus and our interest and emphasis, then I think that there is no decision, no policy of government that is not going to have some kind of fallout, some kind of backlash. So, and that is why the 30% value addition, which for me is going to be a game changer. But achieving a game changer is not going to come, cheap. It's not going to come easy, and all of that. I think that at this point, in the next couple of hours, we're going to start 2026. Nigeria cannot afford to be paying, kid gloves, and all of that to industrial development and growth. So 30% value addition is the minimum that our country should aspire for. Like I said, there's going to be some backlash. I give an example in terms of the share note ban, which initially was for 6 months and all of that. There will always be pushback. What I can say, for example, is that
my apologies,
with some
Senator.
Companies.
The question then would be,
were set up several years ago, lab group.
My sincere apologies, Honorable Minister, if you can hear me. The question then would be, you've talked about the fact that we need to jumpstart a whole load of stuff, and that's amazing. It's what many people want to hear. The question then is, what is the vision that everyone must buy into? You would have, traveled enough to know how some of these countries decided to position themselves. In another 5 years, we're going to do this. Another 10 years, we're going to do this. As you said, we are entering 2026 in a couple of hours or so now. So what should Nigerians be looking forward to in the year ahead, in the decade ahead, so that we can say, okay, these things we used to export raw, for instance, cocoa. We used to export raw cocoa. Now we have started producing chocolates in our country, and on and on and on like that. So many things in the various value chains in the production sector. So what is it that Nigerians should be looking forward to from the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment in the year 2026?
Well, I think that, a lot of that is what this conversation has been dwelling on. It's, under industry, for the first time in several years, we have a Nigerian industrial policy, which, we are determined to implement. We are concerned with the execution of that policy. Early in 2026, that policy is going to be formally unveiled. And that unveiling is going to come with, having implementation guidelines and all of that. So if this policy is implemented, and you look at about 5 strategic pillars of this policy, infrastructural development and competitiveness. Look at the issue of diversification and value chain, and all of that. Look at the issue of investment promotion and business environment reforms. Look at issues that have to do with innovation, technology, and digital industrialization. And look at sustainability in terms of green growth and climate. So all of these things are things that will be in focus going into 2026. And focusing on this and making sure that this is achieved in itself is going to have a rebound effect in terms of our industrial growth and productivity. I've said it at some point in the course of this conversation that our focus in 2026 as a ministry, particularly under the mandate of industry, is to continue to emphasize jobs. It's industrial growth and industries that will provide the jobs that we need. It's productivity. Our country will not make progress without productivity. And that productivity is going to be achieved by the level and extent of industrial good we're able to achieve. The Nigerian industrial policy has an aspiration in terms of what the contributions of industry should be. At the moment, in the second quarter GDP, for the first time, industry was mentioned as being one of the drivers of growth. What we hope is that in 2026, we're going to continue to push on to see how much of the industrial, our GDP is going to be attributed to, to industrial growth and manufacturing. There are issues, that having to do with a whole lot of these. So I think that, productivity, looking at export growth, what's going to be the quantity, in terms of growth of our exports as a country. because this again is what is going to answer and it's going to what is going to respond. As we industrialize and as we manufacture more and more and export, it's the entire value chain, is going to be implicated in all of that. So all of this, and then the MSMEs, which remains the engine of growth, and then the various statistics have more than shown so. The fact, for example, that we've got about 40-something million MSMEs, and all of that, and that about 98% of these are micro. The contribution to GDP is about 46%. In terms of job employment, about 80-something% of employment is to industry. So all of these things will remain the focus and the emphasis going into 2026 by the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. And how much we're able to accomplish this and all of that would be, quite, very important to us as a ministry.
All right, Honorable Minister. Obviously, you have your job cut out for you for 2026, especially because, that's industrial policy. You just got the approval. So we will be looking closely at how it's going to be implemented in 2026. But we have to thank you so much for your time on the program.
I'm happy to have you look as closely, and let's work together to get this done.
We certainly will follow you up. Honorable Minister, Minister of State, Industry, Trade and Investment, Senator John Eno. Thank you so much.
Minister of State, Industry. Thank you.
Minister of State, Industry, Senator John Eno.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and views on the program.
Thank you, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too, sir. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll get this reaction also from Mr. Johnson, since he is connected to this ministry directly, a special advisor to the president. So, Mr. Johnson, thank you for your patience. So, I'm sure you heard what the minister said, and it's a big thing planned for 2026. And it all goes around the small businesses. So you're a special advisor to the president. What would you be doing differently? You talked about the issue of funding, but we know that's not the only thing. We have the new tax law that begins in a couple of hours, but we also have the challenge of infrastructure, especially power. So what would you be advising the president differently that will ease the operations of small businesses in 2026?
Thank you very much for your question. First, I must say that when we started this program, recall that I had asked about cooperation, collaboration with the subnational, and I don't know if it's Ayo or Geoffrey, one of them had asked, one of the anchors had asked that question, and I had spoken to that. But when the Honorable Minister came up, I actually realized that I forgot to actually mention that his ministry has been very, very supportive of everything we do. Because apart from subnational and international cooperation or collaborations, it's also important that there is internal support and collaborations. For instance, if we have a scheme from the presidency and we do not have the buy-in of the ministry, we will not go as far as we intend to go if we don't get the collaboration or the support of the ministers. So that being said, just to mention out there that virtually every clinic, for instance, the minister has availed us with his presence. If we have done 10, it's been about 9 of them, basically. So that shows enormous support.
All right, Mr. Johnson.
Not just the clinics, and everything we do as well.
Yeah, Mr. Johnson.
Now, with regards to 2026.
We're totally out of time, Mr. Johnson. I'll have to buzz in. Let me bring in Farouk. Your last word, Mr. Ibrahim. You look at governance. So let's project. You projected into 2026. It's election year. From the civil society organization point of view, what should we be looking at?
So there are lots of things that we should look forward to when we do some kind of forecasting towards the elections. One is the quick passage of the Electoral Reform Act, especially as it impacts governance and if there are any constitutional amendments that will be passed. But I think on the other hand, there are a lot of conversations around the new tax laws, understanding how this affects businesses and young people and empowerment for young people as well. I think another very important thing is looking at voter turnout. And we just released a survey talking about voter intentions and how Nigerians want to come out and vote. But security is going to be a huge issue. I know that as we continue the program around the year in review, we're also going to be looking at some of the security challenges and how to tackle them. But there are so many issues. Some people say Nigeria is a country of issues, and we can spend the whole day discussing the different issues. But
incidentally, Mr. Farouk, just yesterday we were talking about security and a number of other issues like that. But you know, it's cheering to talk about these things, and not just to talk about them, but to really drill down on the issues and trust that not just the government, but the people also take ownership of the process and embrace it in a way that it's all in our favor. Ibrahim Farouk, Africa Program Coordinator, IAGA Africa, as well as Mr. Temitola Adekunle Johnson, Special Advisor on Job Creation and MSMEs to the President. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this evening.